this book of essays I've been brewing in my head. It's called One Last Thing, and then I swear to God I'll shut up about this forever. Dispatches from the front lines of the war on women. Arguments, opinions, reflections, recollections, a razor tax.
Is this still the title?
Yeah, I kind of got lost in the middle of it and couldn't find a way out.
If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself for the podcast?
I'm Leila Abdul-Rauf, and I'm the guitarist vocalist for Oakland death metal band Vastum.
And you're also in Hammers of Misfortune and Fear 2 and a solo artist as well, correct?
Yes, and I have a few other projects as well.
So let's talk about Vastum, because you have a new album coming out called Orificial Purge. But before we get to that, let's talk about the history of the band. What brought you guys together, and what did you set out to accomplish?
So that's going back almost 10 years, 2009. So Dan, our singer, our front man, he and Kyle House, who's the original other guitarist of Vastum, they've been playing together in Acephalix from here, and they had started earlier. They'd been playing together for a little while, and they began a new band called Corpus that RD, who's also the original drummer of Vastum, was a part of. And Corpus recorded a demo that year, and I had listened to it and was completely blown away by it. I was also friends with Dan and Kyle. So Acephalix played a show with my old metal band Sorrows. So we had known each other for a while, and so when Corpus got together, Kyle asked if I'd want to play second guitar, and I was thrilled. So we started jamming and started writing songs, but the songs that Corpus were writing were more of a death punk style. And then when I started playing with them, it changed direction to be something more just darker death metal. And we thought that at that point we should just be a new band and call ourselves Vastum. And as soon as we did that, we were playing with a different bass player at the time, and Luca, who was also playing in Acephalix, started, jamming with Vastum as well. So that was the original lineup. It was me, Dan, Kyle, RD, and Luca.
So when Vastum emerged, it was around the time that the old school revival was in full swing. Did you guys then, or do you now see yourselves as an old school death metal band?
I'd say yes and no. I know that's what a lot of people describe us as. I don't know. I think we've definitely progressed into something with more influences than just the straight up old school death metal. I mean, the amount of atmosphere that we put into the songwriting is, definitely, I think, stands on its own. Yeah, I think even just our songwriting itself is, it covers a wider range of influences than just the old school Scandinavian death metal stuff from the 80s and 90s.
Now, you describe the music as dark death metal. What do you mean by that?
Dark lyrically, okay. Yeah, lyrically, sonically, and it delves into the depths of darkness. Yeah, and so, a lot of it is the lyrics and the riffs and the sort of hypnotic state that, the repetitiveness of the riffs, especially on the latest album, just have that feeling that you're plunging into something dark and deep.
So let's jump into the new album. It's called Orificial Purge. It'll be coming out October 25th. Tell me about the writing and recording.
Yeah, so Shelby and I were the guitarists, and we were the primary songwriters of the band, starting with Hole Below, which is when Shelby joined. We've been pretty much the songwriting team. And so we tend to write songs on our own, and then we present them to the band when they're more or less a complete song. And so Greg Wilkinson from Earhammer Studios recorded it. He's recorded our last two albums as well. So he knows our sound. He's a good friend. And we just love working with him. So I think he did a great job.
How would you compare this album to your previous albums?
Well, I think it's our best work yet, actually. I think just, each song, I think, stands out as a strong piece. I don't think there's any filler on the record. I feel like it's really strong from start to finish, and there's more ambience infused in between the songs. And, that was my bandmate from Ionophore, Ryan Honecker. He's a string player. He performed the string parts on the intro to the last song, The Sapphic Longing. And we composed some ambient pieces for it too. And Greg and I arranged it, which parts on the album it went. And yeah, I think another big difference is everybody in the band really took part in the mixing. And so, it was much more of a collective effort in that way than Hole Below. So yeah, sonically it's a little, I think it's even heavier. It's got a little less reverb in the guitars. So it's a little drier, but I think that it makes it a lot more just a lot more aggressive and just, a lot more sickening sounding than Hole Below had more of this cavernous sound, like you were at the bottom of a cave.
Yeah, I think Hole Below started going into that kind of, it's called several different things. Like sometimes it's called dissonant death metal, sometimes it's called like avant-garde death metal, but that, what you're describing, the lots of reverb and this kind of hypnotic feeling. And I've only heard the two preview tracks that are on the Bandcamp page right now, but Orificial Purge seems like it's much more condensed and maybe not necessarily old school, but more stripped down and compact.
Yeah, I think that's, like there's something about a drier drum and guitar sound that just makes the attack really intense. And then we like to drown out the vocals and leads in a lot of reverb, but something's retained when you keep the center of it dry.
So you mentioned working with Greg Wilkinson at a studio, Earhammer. I've talked to a few bands from Bay Area who've worked with Greg Wilkinson, and it seems to be the studio of choice for death and black metal bands. How did you first get in touch with him?
Well, I mean, Greg and I, we've been friends for like 15 years, so we were friends first, actually, before his studio really got going. And he used to play and still is playing in bands that my old bands played with a lot in the, early to mid to late aughts. So, that's a friendship over a significant period of time. And, Vastum's first album, Carnal Law, was recorded with Jeff Davis, who passed away in 2012. And we were in the middle of recording Patricidal Lust, the second record, and he died tragically in a motorcycle accident. And so Greg had, at that point, his Earhammer studio had been taken off for the past couple of years. So he was the obvious choice to go to at that point, and he saved the album and mixed it, and was helped us succeed in putting it out. So that was very, very great and timely.
Would you say that he has the same relationship with the Bay Area scene that somebody like Scott Burns had to the Florida scene, or Thomas Skogsberg had to the Stockholm scene?
Yeah, I would say like he's the Oakland death metal maestro. Yeah. And not just Oakland. I mean, people all over are going to him now. Death metal bands from all over the world are recording with him. And then he just, like High on Fire, just got a Grammy record he worked on with them. So his career's really taken off.
And when I compare him to Scott Burns and Thomas Skogsberg, I don't mean to say that all the bands that he produces sound the same or have a similarity to them. It's just that, you go through the credits and it's rarely surprising to see that a band from your areas has worked with him. And, like you said, his productions are very punchy and very, heavy. Like, I don't know how else to describe it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's really great with guitar tones, and we experimented with additional amps this time, and we really tried different things, and using different distortion pedals and things like that, which we had never done before. And so he's always down to experiment with all of it, with the ambient stuff and the vocal stuff. And Dan and I think we pushed ourselves vocally this time, and really included each other on every song. more than I think on the we made a bigger effort that both of our voices were going to be heard on each of the songs. And I think that made a big difference. And, not just that we're both singing on all of the songs, but that, we tried all these different vocal characters, low and high and mid-range voices and whispers and, chanting and all kinds of stuff. So it was really fun.
Now, how do you break up the vocal lines between the two of you? How do you decide who sings what?
It's some of it's trial and error. We just get together, the two of us, and I think instinctually know which parts of the lyrics that we write ourselves that we want to sing, and then we can just instinctually imagine the other person taking over certain lines. So I think that's usually how it goes. We'll write lyrics separately, for a whole song. One of us will, and then so whoever's writing all of the lyrics will have an idea or sense or who's going to sing which lines, just based on the way the words sound and the way our voices sound singing the words. So a lot of it's very sort of phonetic and the pitches and timbres of our voice, how they blend with the words. Over the decade we've learned each other's voices and can imagine certain words sung a certain way. So yeah.
Let's talk about the lyrics a little bit. Well, I guess to put it bluntly, what are the lyrics about?
Good question.
Because I understand that they tend to be more abstract and not necessarily about specific things, just about.
Yeah, I think, well, I can only speak for my lyrics, but yeah, I usually have a specific thing in mind that I don't necessarily want to share. And I have that thing in mind when I'm writing a certain feeling, a certain experience. But I like to keep the lyrics vague enough so that it's not so obviously about that thing that I'm feeling or that's horrifying me or haunting me. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
The other reason I wanted to bring up the lyrics is in one of the promo releases I got, the lyrics were described as having inchoate themes, which is not a word that obviously I've ever said before. And so I just like the fact that you're able to use that word to describe your lyrics.
It's a good description, I'd say. I mean, it's, yeah, not a fully formed idea necessarily, or sometimes it is. I wouldn't say it's always not fully formed, but it's the horror of not knowing something. It's a horror of being haunted by something and not really, as soon as you know it, it's not horrifying anymore. So it's sort of that space between not knowing and knowing, if you will.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like the theory of what makes H.P. Lovecraft's stories so scary is he's constantly describing things that can't be described, and it's left to the reader's imagination what is actually terrifying.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're definitely not a Lovecraft-themed band like many out there, but I love his work, and it's definitely, at least on a subconscious level, has infused itself into my brain, and I do remember, reading certain passages from Dreams in the Witch House and Mountains of Madness. I think those are my favorite books. So yeah, it's definitely made its way, but not so concretely, maybe.
So I'd like to talk about the album artwork for Orificial Purge. It was done by a fine artist named Lena Terpstra, and it's a bit of a departure from your previous artwork. How did you choose Terpstra to do this artwork, and what was the instruction that you gave her?
So this was all through Dan Butler, and he went to one of her exhibits. She's a San Francisco artist, and he went to one of her exhibits and just fell in love with her work and also really identified with it. Dan's an artist himself, and he designed the covers to Hole Below and the vinyl artwork for Patricidal Lust. So I agree with him that he and she are very connected artistically and aesthetically. When I first saw her work, I wasn't sure if it would really work for a Vastum cover, but as the painting was progressing, it really, really struck as like the perfect album cover. So, I have to thank Dan for connecting us with Lena, and, we're all pretty stoked on the cover.
I'm going to attempt to describe the album artwork, which is extremely abstract, but it's a lot of positive and negative spaces, which includes the cross motif that Vastum used on a previous album. And then at one point, the flat surfaces turn into a kind of abstract brushwork, which the artist uses in a lot of her work. If you could, I know you weren't necessarily involved with the creation of the artwork, but if you could link the artwork to the music, like how do you think they relate to each other?
I know Dan would give you a very different answer than I would. And he would have a much more expansive connection to it lyrically than I would. But for me, I think it's there's something really ambiguous about the cover that struck me just looking at it. You don't really know what you're looking at. I mean, you know what the crosses are. There's something menacing, and they're dripping, but then there's all this, beauty in it. There are these curves. There's something almost feminine about it. So you have these very sort of contrasting elements that, you know, it's sort of beautiful and horrifying at the same time. That's the best way I can describe it, or that's my own impression when I look at it.
I really like it, and to me, it's a little bit of a throwback to some of the album covers in the '90s when bands started moving away from, you know, the more cartoony illustrations that had previously come with like death and thrash metal to much more abstract art. You know,
it's challenging. It's not your average death metal cover art, and, you know, for better or for worse, you know, some people don't like that and some people do. But it challenges the viewer in a way that I think the cartoony stuff doesn't.
Yeah, and I mean, not to be judgmental, but I am 40 years old, and, you know, there is a point where, you know, when I see something, as you said, that's challenging or not necessarily one-dimensional, it does, I think, lend itself to a more adult audience. I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know, by adult, you meaning like older adult? Because, I mean,
you know, look, I've got my share of Morbid Angel shirts with demons on them. And, you know, that I definitely have a love for all that stuff. But I also think that when a band comes up with something a little bit more abstract or a little bit more, for lack of a better word, artistic, I think it says something about the band. They're maybe a little bit more thoughtful than the rest of the bands in the scene.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think, I mean, I know we have fans that hate the artwork, and
well, I mean, it's not death metal if you don't have some segment of the population hating everything you do, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
So we spoke about your background a little bit off mic. Very surprising to find out that I'm based in Malaysia and you actually lived in Malaysia for a short period of time.
Yeah.
How did you end up in the Bay Area?
I ended up in the Bay Area through a friend of mine who I went to college with in New Jersey, which is where I grew up. And he was living out here for a few years. I had actually dropped out of a PhD program in 2002. I was studying speech pathology and just decided right in the middle of it that I didn't want to be an academic and write papers for the rest of my life. So I went through this period in my 20s where I just traveled and was unrooted and, didn't know where I should go. And I was traveling from city to city and staying with different friends for a month at a time here and there. And my friend that was living in San Francisco, we just ended up talking on the phone one day, and we talked about starting a music project, and that was Tim Scammell, the bass player of Saros. And so he happened to have an extra room for rent in his apartment. So that's how I ended up in San Francisco in 2003. And I've been in the Bay Area ever since.
The Bay Area is just a very important part of metal history and often mythologized because of what happened there throughout the 80s. How much of that was a factor in you moving out there?
It was definitely somewhat of a factor. I knew that I wanted to start a metal band, and I knew I wanted it to be influenced by bands like Death and Merciful Fate and Carcass and Judas Priest, all my favorite metal bands pretty much, but more progressive. Saros is more of a progressive, blackened, thrashy band. I don't know, we kind of blended a bunch of different styles, but so I knew Tim being here made it easy just logistically, and I knew that there was a good metal scene, not just from back in the day, but even, as recent as 2003, there was stuff happening at the underground level that I knew I'd be able to find musicians pretty easily. So.
Yeah. So you mentioned what was happening in 2003, and there was like a kind of the seeds of a new black and death metal scene with Ludacris and bands like that, Impaled. And just in the last decade, I've noticed that, my impression is that there's been an explosion of death and black metal bands, and there's a real resurgence in the Bay Area scene. How would you describe the Bay Area metal scene now?
Well, it's interesting because you have like multiple generations of musicians now. So you have people that are still around that were doing it 30 years ago, and some of those bands are still around. Then you have people my age in their 40s that have been around for some time and are still doing some of the same bands or starting new bands. And then you have, the youngsters, and there's all kinds of younger people doing interesting stuff with death metal, black metal, death rock, blending all sorts of styles together. So it's just a lot more, you have all this history that's still happening now, and you have all these this new blood as well. So it feels bigger than it did even when I moved here. Now,
as somebody who grew up somewhere else, how would you describe the Bay Area scene? Would you say that there's a character to the music scene there, or to the people who are part of it? Like
as distinct from other?
Yeah, I mean, like when I think of the New York scene, it's a lot of kids who. And when I say kids, I mean, mostly young people, just because I'm 40 and so I get to call everybody kids now. But, it's a lot of people who move there for college and so tend to be quite educated and maybe veering towards professional careers. And so their taste in music isn't necessarily limited to one scene or one style of music. And so you see a lot of cross-pollination across, the different scenes. Like you'll see the same people at hardcore shows that you'll see at death metal shows that you'll see at drone or experimental shows. And my impression of the Bay Area scene just from the short time that I was there, was it was very similar in that sense that, like people weren't necessarily, you may see somebody at a Carcass concert on one night, and you'll see them at Gilman a couple weeks later. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, that's true. There's definitely a big overlap among the darker, like any like darker music, whether it's black metal, death rock. I don't know, maybe like some of the darker punk stuff. And yeah, the same people, or noise shows, you'll see some of the same people at all the shows. But then you have people that only go to the noise shows or ambient shows or electronic shows or only the death metal. I mean, you'll have people that only go to the genre of their choice as well. It's big enough that there is this significant overlap, but then there's significant sort of like, I don't know, like separate scenes as well. People that really just like one thing. There's a lot of that too.
Yeah. And also, cities like New York and San Francisco or Oakland, being somewhat bastions of progressive ideas and progressive politics, I think the music scenes tend to be a little bit more open-minded and a little bit more accepting of experimentation and, bands that don't necessarily adhere rigidly to one style or one sound.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's just more, it's more diverse musically and just demographically, racially, gender-wise, etc. It's a lot more diverse here.
So what's the rest of the year look like for you?
The rest of the year will be Terabellum recording, our debut. So that's, Joe Hutton, Sam Foster, Nathan Verrill, and I. And we hope to play our debut live show at some point as well. And then, so that'll keep me busy the next few months before Vastum gets ready to do the Shadow Frost Fest in February. And I'll be doing a solo ensemble set as well. And that's, so Nathan and Ryan perform with me, for the solo set. And we'll all be going out to Maryland for that Shadow Frost Festival. February 21st to 23rd.
22nd, right? Yeah.
Yeah, that
Very
weekend.
Cool. So is Shadow Frost a new festival? Because I don't believe I've heard of it before.
Yeah, it is the inaugural Shadow Frost. It's the people that did the Shadow Woods Fest for a bunch of years. In the summer, it was at a campsite out in the country, rural Maryland. And so this will be in the winter at an inn, some ballroom, I think, is what I was told.
So it's an indoor fest.
It's an indoor fest. Thankfully.
Very cool. In addition to Shadow Frost, is Vastum going to be doing any touring?
Yeah, we're just working that out right now. We plan to do something on the West Coast and East Coast next year, both before and after Migration Fest, which will be in Pittsburgh. So we just have to iron out the details as to when we're going to do the bulk of the touring in addition to that fest.
Orificial Purge is the new Vastum album. It'll be out October 25th through $20 Spin. I'm assuming there's going to be physical releases and vinyl in addition to digital releases.
Yeah, so $20 Spin is releasing all the physical formats, CD, cassette, vinyl, and I think there are two variants of the vinyl. There's sort of a black and milky white variant, and then there's something else. I think it might be a gold variant as well. I'm not sure about the second one. I actually haven't seen the vinyl yet. I know the copies are sitting at our guitarist place right now, but I haven't physically opened it up and looked at it yet. I just know from what I saw online this week. But yeah, there's some colors.
And the first Fear 2 album, No More Days in the Light, will be out November 8th through... you have your own Bandcamp page, right?
Yes, yeah.
And if people want to follow Vastum or find out news, how can they do that?
I would go to Facebook. Yeah, Facebook, and then Earsplit and 20 Bucks Spin put out announcements all the time as well. A couple of us have Instagram pages, so they can follow our Instagrams.
Is there anything else you want to say?
I think that'll do it. Thanks so much.
No worries. Oh, you were also in Sutek Conspiracy, right?
Yeah, that's not something I hear every day. Yeah.
No, because I had that split with Groin Churn, and that was a really cool split. And I never found out too much about that band. It just, I saw that split, and I guess you guys had a couple other releases, and then kind of seemed to disappear. So
yeah, so that was the band. That was the hardcore band I was playing with when I was in grad school in Indiana at Purdue, and that was the late 90s to early aughts. And Groin Churn was a band from South Africa that our singer was friends with, or was connected with someone because his parents lived in South Africa. And that's how that split came about. And most of our releases were all splits. And, so there was a discography, I think, at some point. Someone released a discography in 2002 on CD. But yeah, I left the Midwest, and I had a couple of other bands after that. And so that's why the band broke up. But yeah, that's cool that you remember that.
Well, like I said, I'm pretty old. I thought it was cool when I saw that you were part of that band, and like I said, I didn't really know what happened to that band after I heard the split. So I think it's great that you're still making music.
That's awesome. Yeah, the band that came after Sutek was the band that more people remember, which is Memento Mori. And I know there's like a few bands with that name, but we were the one from Columbus, Ohio. And, we actually toured a lot. Sutek did some touring too, but Memento Mori was touring a lot in those days as well. And the guitarist and I actually just performed a couple of the songs from Valkyrie, the band we did after Memento Mori. We just performed them 2 nights ago for the first time in 17 years. So it's just, I don't know. It's just funny that you brought up Sutek, because I've been sort of reliving my past a little bit this week by playing some of these old songs. Yeah, on acoustic guitar.
That's great. Is there anything else you want to say?
I think that's good.
Cool. Thank you so much, Leila.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian.